The Finance Committee meeting of the Senate to order. Senator Hickman, would you do us the honors today? You're which five?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Lord God, we know you're here. Lord, we can feel your presence. Lord, we know that you're with us. Lord, where two or more gather, you're in the presence. Lord, we just ask you for your wisdom, your guidance, Lord, that we will do the right things for the people of Georgia. In your son's name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chairman Hickman. We've got a few bills that I hope will go maybe fairly quickly, and then we've got one that's probably going to be very lengthy today. Senator Ginn is here if you want to come up here, and I know your bill is fairly simple. It eliminates the estimated tax off of the bill, which is one of many things that is in a bill that we passed out, Senate Bill 349. But I know you want to vote on this one issue, so I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully the members have a LC 432878. Many of y'all see your notice of assessment that comes on your real property each year. And one of the bad things is that assessment notice is sent out by the Board of Assessors, that's required in Georgia law. And they're appointed individuals that when they do that, they have to put if you look on line 33, they're required to put an estimate of the current year's taxes for all levying authorities. Well, all they can do is tell you what the assessment was and what the new assessment is, and then they send an estimate based on last year's millage rate. Well, so if your assessment doubled and they're sending out an estimate of the taxes, they're going to say your taxes are doubling. And for me, that's the craziest thing in the world, because what's happening is you're totally misleading the public on what's going to happen in reality, because the only people that know what's going to happen in reality are the governing authorities, whether that be the Board of Education or the Board of Commissioners or City Council or something along those lines that sets that millage rate. And if your values double, I don't know of any jurisdiction in the state that's ever doubled their taxes and the amount of taxes that they collect in 1 year to the next. And so for me, basically what I'm tired of doing is misleading the public. And so it doesn't get much simpler than this, but just to take off that estimated number on there. And if you turn over to lines 53, that also follows that same thing. And so that we're not confusing the public. It's basically just one of those things that, if the local government's going to increase taxes, whether they want to try to, quote, back into a backdoor tax increase by leaving their millage rate the same and raising the assessments up, that's required. They have to have public notices and all the things there. They're required to have the 3 public meetings. They have to. There's certain requirements on those. They have to schedule over 2 days and the things there. And for me, that's up to the governing authority for each of those taxing jurisdictions. But the assessors, they don't know what the thing is going to be. And so all I want to do is quit lying to the public and give them something that's more accurate. And that's just what there is. This is the change of assessment from A to B.
All right. Thank you. We've heard this once, but not everybody was here. I think we were short of a quorum that day. Senator Dolezal, do you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this. Don't you think that there's a difference in posting in the legal organ that nobody reads, which is the newspaper, which is another law we need to change, that there's going to be a public hearing on a rollback? Don't you think that's different from receiving something in the mail informing people what would happen if the millage rate is not changed?
And I would be glad for, if you want to work on a bill to change where we send notice to the public that there's going to be a tax increase, that you send out okay, here's what your estimated tax bill will do. I'll be glad to, but the intent of this is to clear up this error. And any way you want to do notice, I mean, I'm good for the legal organ. I'm good for mailing out a notice to the taxpayers, and whatever you want to do. That's one of those things that I'll be glad to work with you on that. But this is one that
follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Help me understand what the error is, because what the notice says is the estimate of your ad valorem tax bill for the current year is based on the previous or most applicable year's millage rate. That's not unclear, nor is it an error. That's very descriptive as to what the estimate is based on. And I think that I'm confused what you're saying the error is, because when that notice is in there that it describes what I just read, it's not an error.
The error is that it's an estimate, because nobody can tell you what the estimate is. There is no estimate there. All they're doing is doing the simple math of taking the assessed value, increasing it, and last year's millage rate. That's not an estimate. That's a factual number. An estimate would be something would be realistic, and the only people that can give you a realistic number are those governing authorities, whether that be the city council, county commissioners, board of education, whatever. They're not giving you an estimate. They're simply doing math to tell you this is what your assessment went up, and based on that misinformation of what was last year, you're not getting anything. So for me, there's nothing in there that's an estimate.
Would you agree that the millage rate was unchanged, and the assessment stayed the same and was not appealed, that estimate would actually be accurate?
No, because you don't know. Nobody knows what the budget for any local governing authority is going to be, and whether that budget's going to go up or down, or what's going to happen.
What I
and the
asked
only person that can do that is the local government.
If the millage rate remained unchanged, do you not agree that tax estimate would be accurate?
If the millage rate didn't change and the assessment didn't change,
Well, the only scenario in which the assessment is going to change is if they appeal it.
no. The assessment does. Sometimes they change, sometimes they don't. But this is where, for me, when you look, the only way that you're going to get an accurate estimate is to look at where the local government authority budget's going to be. And then you can back into, they're supposed to set their budget and then do the math based on the total valuation to come up with a millage rate.
Chairman, I don't think there's a scenario in which when the county does their official assessment, there's no scenario in which that changes other than an appeal.
I've done this for a long time, Cindy. I can promise you there are situations where people's assessments don't change.
I'm saying when you receive the assessment notice, that is the official notice from the municipality that your property is assessed at X dollars.
That's correct. And it could be the same as the year before.
Yes, but that is your assessment for that year. And the only way that it will change for that year is if you appeal it. The governing entity does not voluntarily change that assessment once it's been sent out.
Typically, that's the case.
Okay.
They do make errors, and they do come back and correct those errors.
Okay, that would be an anomaly in this
Yes,
scenario.
I agree with you.
So that's the set assessment, other than an error in the millage rate. You would agree is year to year millage rates don't tend to change a lot.
That's depending on the government, but typically you don't see a local government much more than a 5 or probably an extreme would be a 10% increase in their taxes.
All right, we got to keep moving because we've got a lot of stuff today. Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hitting on what Senator Dolezal was saying, Senator, again, the assessment notice sent out because the assessment has been completed. The question is whether the local government's going to reduce the millage rate in order to equal out the cost of the increase or not. I think your concern is we're giving somebody a false notification that may not be the actual end of value they're paying. Is that fair?
Yes.
So maybe we should do is say, here's your assessment. Here is your county, city, schools' current millage rate. If nothing changes from the last year, it could be this. However, contact your local government to see if they're, at this date, they're going to set the millage rate. Maybe that gives you a disclaimer of sorts. But I think the purpose of originally having the notices sent out when the Taxpayer Protection Act went out back in 2010 was so they would have something to see, so they would then be empowered to contact their local government authorities in order to say, hey, my assessment's gone up. Aren't you guys going to roll down the millage rate?
And that's where, for me, this is just stopping the misinformation that we're doing. I'm happy to work with you on a bill that requires them to send a first-class letter to the taxpayer, whatever, however you want to do that. But for me, the misinformation that we're doing is a disservice to Oh, the citizen.
All right, we've got one person signed up, and we do have to keep moving. So Dante Handel from ACCG, and try to limit it to just a minute or two, if you would.
Good afternoon, Chairman Huffseller, members of the committee. My name is Dante Handel with ACCG. Appreciate Senator again bringing this bill. Thinking about some of the discussion that the committee's had, I think there are two issues that are commingled here on this assessment notice, which is that the assessment notice is about the value on the property and not inherently about the taxes. So I think that value and taxes are the two things wrapped up. This bill would separate it out so that the assessment notice is giving the taxpayer notification that their assessment has been updated for the year and where to appeal, and I think that's the function of it. And then if there are concerns about the millage rates later on in the process, it's most appropriate for that taxpayer to take that up with the respective local governments. Now, to Senator Dolezal's question about if the millage rate were to remain unchanged, would that estimate be accurate? I would say that it would not in all instances, because those estimates very often do not factor in all exemptions, and they never factor in credits, such as that homeowner tax relief grant on the bill this past year, so that they're very, very inaccurate. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, we probably won't do any questions just because of time, so we appreciate your testimony. Did you have something, Senator Estevez, you wanted to say, or? Okay. All right, we can, we do have to keep moving, so we can entertain a motion. Okay, we've got a motion from Senator Eccles to pass. We got a second from Senator Estevez. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? All right, 4 and 4. I'll break the tie in the affirmative. I don't really.
Did I miss somebody? I saw 4-3.
4 to 4. But I'm going to break the tie in your favor, even though I think this one piece is not enough. We need a more complete bill.
Thank you.
So the vote, Mr. Chair,
Is to pass the bill, yes. 5 to 4.
Thank you.
Senator Cardin Summers is here. This is a bill that I believe we had last year. Was that correct? 2 years ago?
Yes, sir.
But time flies, okay?
Absolutely it does. Thank you, members of the committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing this bill. Very short, very simple bill. This will be a bill, it's a type CA type bill. It'll have to be voted on by the people. This is a farm-related bill that will allow aircraft, if the people vote on it, to be ad valorem tax-free that only deal with agricultural spraying. And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to amend it and make sure we include aerial applicators, because a lot of farmers are now using drones to spray their crops. And so just on that level. So if I can do that now or do it on the floor or whatever you all, what's your pleasure?
Well, you can't do it on the floor from this committee
Right,
because we
right.
engross these bills. So
Yes, sir.
anything you do has to be perfected
I think it had
here.
to be perfected here, so if you don't mind.
Correct. All right, so this would take so you're talking about drones too then, I guess?
Yes,
Drones?
just only drones are used for agricultural spraying,
Uh-huh.
that type thing, agricultural
Okay.
use. I mean, this
Okay.
bill is 100% only for agricultural use. Pesticide, herbicide, fungicide. We passed this out a year or two ago, and it got stalled on day 40 at the House.
Okay, I think Senator Eccles, you might have been first over there.
Thank you. So I'm reading on line 13, it says aircraft used exclusively for the aerial application of fertilizers. Does that not include drones?
Well, if you and I talked about it,
Right.
I wouldn't mind putting the word aircraft, including drones,
Okay,
just to make sure if you would make
Okay.
that as a motion or amendment, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
okay.
All right, Senator Hickman.
Senator, thank you for this. I fully understand it. My question, aren't they buying these things with a gate card anyway, so wouldn't they be exempt? No, sir, they're not. I checked on that. If a farmer can use his gate card for that right there, some counties it's quasi and some counties it's not. So the answer to that question is it's 50-50.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I appreciate the work you're doing for your district and the area. We keep adding onesie, twosie stuff. I think since I've been here, we've exempted every single thing that could possibly do with agriculture, at least twice now.
We love to eat, sir.
I understand. I'd like to live to have an income tax reduction again, so I appreciate what you're bringing the bill, but I want you to understand that I'm not voting for one more tax exemption, only tax reductions.
I'm for taking a lot of tax exemption off the record and put it back on the books too, by the way.
Okay, Senator Dolazal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, thank you for bringing this question. So this does not need to be purchased by a farmer. This can be purchased by a commercial entity that provides this type of service to the agriculture industry.
That is correct.
What's your policy reason for doing this?
The basic part of that would be, answer to your question is, there's several states around us that does not charge ad valorem tax on their aircraft. And they'll come in and spray farmers' crops and undercut the people in Georgia that are having to pay ad valorem tax. So these aircraft cost like $2 million plus, and they get billed on them every year. Well, a guy from Mississippi can fly over here and spray for a month and go home, and he can do it a lot cheaper. I'm just trying to protect our own people. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Hickman, one more time, quickly.
Senator Summers, don't they call those aircrafts air tractors?
There are
And
air
not
tractors. That's a
airplanes.
very good point. They're
Air
air
tractors,
tractors.
yeah.
Listen, guys, you can't travel in them. You can't do anything in them. They're one-seater, very tight. They hold 600-something gallons of liquid. All they do is fly in and out of of crop fields every day. That's it, air tractors. And the drones have big tanks on them, and all they're used for is for mapping and spraying fields. That is it.
All right, we've, don't seem to have any more questions on this. I do agree, we keep exempting a lot of things.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
have concerns on that as well. We've got a motion, I believe, from Senator Hickman to pass. Is there a second?
Could we, if you don't mind, sir, could you
Well, let's
insert
get the
word-
motion, and then we can do an
Thank you.
amendment.
Thank you.
We've got a motion and a second. So now, if there's an amendment to be offered, that would be the time.
Make the motion to amend it on line 13 after aircraft, and add including drones. Between aircraft and used, is that,
You'll need to do it on line 25 as well.
and on 25? So on line 13 and 25.
All right, we've got a motion to amend it. Is there a second? Senator Estevez has seconded the amendment. So all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. We've got 4 in favor of the amendment. All those opposed, did I count wrong? So raise your hands again. Okay, so we've got 6 in favor of the amendment. Okay, those opposed to the amendment? Looks like 2 opposed. Did everybody vote, or did I miss something? There's 9 of you, aren't there? You were 4 against it. Okay, so then 7 to 2. So the amendment is part of the bill. Now we're to the underlying bill. All those in favor of the bill as amended, raise your hand. There's 4 in favor, all those 5 in favor as amended, all those opposed. Okay, I'm gonna use chairman's prerogative to tie this vote, because I have concerns about too many things, so that will make the bill 5-5.
Okay.
So it doesn't pass on the tie.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on. Senator Eccles, I think you had a bill here, and I know I believe it's passed out over in the House, but this would be your opportunity if you want to up or down vote on it.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just the T-SPLOST legislation that we discussed a few weeks ago. Nothing has changed, there's been no amendments. I think we've exhausted testimony, and so we'll just go for a vote and see what happens.
All right. Is everybody familiar with this? We talked about it in committee, but maybe not everybody was there, but this would,
I can
just give a quick summary on
So
it.
the current T-SPLOST law in Georgia requires 100% of municipalities sign the IGA to put a T-SPLOST referendum on the ballot for the voters to elect. This past summer in Hall County, a situation arose where a city that has less than 2% of the population of Hall County would not sign the IGA without the county meeting great demands of that city. So the county chose not to move forward with the T-SPLOST. So this revision to that law was actually negotiated between ACCG and GMA, and it changes that threshold from 100% of municipalities to 50%. And then at that point, it would go on the referendum for the voters to decide.
All right, if there's not any questions, we can, Senator Orrock, you have one?
Chair is ready to take a motion. I move to pass on Senate Bill 33.
I didn't see any questions, so we're probably okay. We've got a motion for due passage at the second by Senator Estevez. All those in favor, any further discussion by anybody on this? So all those in favor of this, raise your hand. Okay, opposed? Looks like there's 2 nays, so the motion carries. All right. We've got Senator Hickman's bill that, again, I think we were having a hearing and weren't sure we had a quorum the other day. You can present it here if you want to, or you can go up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be here to present this bill. This bill is a constitutional amendment bill, and I'm very passionate about this. I've worked on this concept because, just like many of y'all, I've seen a lot of these school systems building these exorbitant football fields and baseball fields and artificial turf this and artificial turf that, because the ESPLOST money can only be used for capital expenditures. So that's the purpose behind this bill. And I think y'all are very aware that the General Assembly has been very passionate about literacy for the last couple of years, and this is another way to enhance our children being able to read. As Governor Kemp said several times, there is no next year in this situation just like this. This bill, I also presented to the Minority Caucus one morning and got give me and the Minority Caucus to sign on the bill. But what it does, it allows a portion of ESPLOST. If ESPLOST is ongoing right now, it does not affect that. If it's in planning stage, it does not affect that. It's when the next ESPLOST comes about, it allows the superintendent to take a minimum of 0, not mess with ESPLOST, or a maximum of 15% of that ESPLOST money and put it back into the classroom. You know, we know that classrooms need instructional material help. The teachers need mentors. The children need tutors. They need supplies. That's what this bill does. So it's a minimum of 0. There's not a mandate they do it, but it has a minimum of 0 and a max of 15. In our county, Bullock County, 5% is $50,000 a month. So that would take $50,000 a month, potentially put it back into the classroom. It can't be used to cut the grass. It can't be used to wax the halls. It can't be used for football coaches or PEs. It has to go into the classroom. Actually in the bill, the wording in the bill says the procurement of materials, it's on line 28, the procurement of materials, supplies, and instructional materials supports be used for educational purposes in the classroom, provided, however, that expenditures made pursuant to subparagraph B4 shall be accounted for in a separate restricted account to be used solely for such expenditures and shall comprise not more than 15% of local school system's total expenditure of proceeds of tax for each school. Mr. Chairman, also, and I won't share with you this newspaper, but also an article that came out this past week in my area, and it's a school system that has a bottom 5% school. And this is a grandmother statement. She said, why are we failing? Why are we that low in the state? We shouldn't be. What is taking place within these 4 walls? She then went and criticized the board, and she said, for not sharing what is going on inside classrooms and instead focusing on other events at the school, such as a new football stadium. So again, this bill goes back into the classroom, can only be used for supplies, mentors for teachers, tutors for the children, instructional material for the classroom. Mr. Chairman, I'd be open for any question.
Senator Dolezal, I believe, was first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to grab the sheet back from the leader here.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, thank you for bringing this. Quick question. I know that you said the number can be from 0 to 15%. I'm curious on line 50, where it's the actual question that will be on the ballot, though, references shall. And so I'm wondering, I know that in our county, traditionally, we've always viewed eSPOS as being for capital projects, and we've got more capital projects than we know what to do with because of the growth in our county.
Exactly.
Does the shall there preclude a county from doing 0% if that's what they wish to do?
No, sir. No, sir. My understanding from the attorneys is it does not. They don't. They do not have to do it. We originally, Senator, had a minimum of 5% in there, and then after further discussion with a lot of people, I felt like the mandatory was too much, so we took it out and put 0.
Okay, I just want to make sure that your intent's accurate, because once this gets out of here, we can't change it. So I would maybe defer to some of the attorneys on the committee I just want to ensure that, because I would agree with your intent, and I'd be fine with it if it's 0 to 15. But as I read this, shall the Constitution be amended so as to provide that a portion of the sales tax for educational purposes shall be used and expended for the procurement. So I don't know that 0 maybe 0 can be a number in that. I'm asking that question out loud.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from on that, and we'll let the attorney have a little bit of time to review that while we're discussing it, but I share your concerns on that. Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, first, I want to thank you for your extraordinary work on literacy.
Thank you,
I
sir.
think you're really moving the needle. My concerns are around SPOS in general. All right, a SPOS is designed as a capital tool. It's almost like a bonding type of authority, right? Because you're going to say the determination of the time of that SPOS is to pay for a certain amount of things, and they're physical capital type projects, and that's the same in T-SPOS as it is in E-SPOS. And I'm afraid as soon as you crack this nut the first time, then eSPOS, we know it'll be gone. This will become part of general operations for everything. And I know what we're saying, and we say it every time, that no, we're only going to make one exception. I will tell you, my 14 years of sitting on this committee, for every time we said we made one exception, we made 10 more. It never stops after one. I think if we need more dollars, there's a mechanism in place already. With school systems, they have a millage rate. They can set that millage rate. We have a QBE formula. We help out schools that don't have as much funds in certain areas. But again, I'm afraid we're losing the integrity of a SPOS, which is made for capital projects. We do this, even though your intent is magnificent. Love what you're doing, but I think we can solve that in ways that are already in statute, as opposed to what will end up being, I believe, the end of capital and moving everything to operational SPOS.
Well, you know, Senator, there's been several bills attempted for Operation Law, and they've always failed. They've never gone any farther.
But this would be just that, Senator, if you're going to talk about adding teachers and coaches and things of that nature. That's
No, I
not
didn't say coaches. Coaches not involved in it. It's only
Teachers.
teachers into the classroom. Coaches not
a
involved.
teacher, an instructor, right? That's an operational cost. That is not a capital cost.
Well, I agree with that. I agree, but it's in the classroom. It's not in the hallways and not for cutting the grass.
Okay, Senator
Thank you.
Beach, I believe
Thank
you were
you.
next.
Yeah, I just, look, I appreciate your intent also. I'm not going to support this because I have to agree with Chairman Albers and some of Senator Chairman Dolezal's concerns. You know, when we do a eSPOS in Fulton County, they know they're going to get a new middle school, a new high school, and so on, and it's nothing but capital projects. I think we're going into dangerous territory when we just let money be spent on materials or I think it says instruct operations and so on. I think that's not a good thing on SPOS. I wouldn't agree with this on a T-SPOS either. I wouldn't want transportation money to go towards salaries or whatever. When we do a T-SPOS, we know we're going to get an intersection, a bridge, a road, whatnot, and you have a list. And I just think that this is setting a tough precedent. So I'm not going to be able to support it, but I love what you're doing with literacy and your intent of this, and keeping it in the classroom, but I think there are other ways to fund that, not through an eSPOS.
Senator
Thank you, sir.
Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, this doesn't change the voting requirement or the notice and the public meetings that would happen with school boards having a list of items that would be used to purchase. The SPOS would be used to purchase.
No,
it wouldn't
sir.
change the disclosure
No,
requirements.
sir. No, they've still had the legal process of going, bringing it before the voters and doing the legal stuff in the paper, outlining what the project's going to be used for. It
Yeah,
would
so
not change.
if voters had an issue with it being used on materials and instructional supports, then then they could vote that down.
Of course.
And the other thing is that I'm assuming the vision here is not for school districts to use this for pens and pencils and smaller expenses, but to use it on material supplies and instructional supports that would be more for systemic change, more bigger projects.
That's right, sir.
Like a capital project would be.
That's right. That's right.
And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, I understand the concerns about school budgets and being used for the appropriate thing, but there is a millage rate cap for school systems that they can't go above 20 mils. So there are several school systems that are at the cap and are not grandfathered in. So they're fairly limited, and they're having to pay for a lot of other things, like bus expenses, which will be covered by SPLOST.
That's right. That's right.
But they're having to pay for a lot of things, and they're kind of limited on what they could do with their millage rate.
Yeah, to go back to Senator Albert's question is that our daughter-in-law teaches in a school system. She buys $100 a month for supplies, and the QB formula, which hadn't updated since 1985 or something like that, provides $100 a year. So there's this again, and I can't imagine every teacher in the state of Georgia would support this bill. No question about it.
All right, Senator Eccles, you were next.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this bill. As a former high school teacher, I can speak firsthand to some of the things that are happening. So I taught in a school that had a brand new gym that now has a turf football field, soccer field, but I didn't have a set of textbooks for my students to use. And that's a problem when we have all of these other things, but the job that we are there to do is to provide an education, and we couldn't do it because we didn't have the supplies in the classroom that we needed. So I'm in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Senator Gooch.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to help the chairman here find a compromise. So I sort of have a similar opinion of Chairman Eccles, but also these two gentlemen to my left. In my district, I'm seeing the same scenario. You've got the prettiest ball fields, recreational complexes, gymnasiums, stadiums, but we can't buy books. Our kids, I have 3 boys, 2 of them are in high school, one's left and gone off to college, same scenario. What I would like to see, because what I see around the state is school boards are a lot like local governments. They're afraid that if they don't have a project for the next 6 years of SPLOST, they may not ever get it back. If they ever give it up, they may not ever get it back. So they're going to build something. So why don't you put a requirement in here that this money that gets used for operating would be a direct rollback on the millage for school tax. That lowers your income or your property taxes on your property owners in the county. It allows you to use a portion of this eSPLOST for operations, but it doesn't allow them to just keep growing the size of the government. Does that make sense? So you're offsetting the ad valorem tax burden on the property owners by utilizing some of the eSPLOST for those operations. If they don't need the money for classrooms to build new schools, let's not go just build a bunch of projects just to be using SPLOST, if you understand what I'm saying. So this, to me, to require the millage rate be rolled back by whatever amount of this money gets used out of eSPLOST is a good benefit for the taxpayers as well. So I'm just looking for a compromise to help you
Are you
out.
talking about, Senator, are you talking about the money that's used for the classroom?
Yes. Non-capital. It would be to roll back the M&O of the school operations. Instead of using ad valorem taxes like we currently do,
Right.
you would reduce the millage rate by the same dollar amount of eSPLOST taxes that gets utilized for those non-capital expenditures.
Right. Okay.
Does everybody understand what I'm getting to? Yeah, hybrid. So I want, and it sort of addresses what Senator Estevez was talking about with a millage rate cap. There are some schools that may be reaching that 20 mil cap. This would allow them also to lower their millage rate, but it would be a benefit to the homeowners and the property owners of the county. we know the problems that we're having with assessments, and property taxes are out of control in some areas of the state. This helps solve that by using some of those sales tax dollars, but not to grow the size of the budgets, but basically move some of the monies from one account to the other. But it has to be a rollback of the millage rate, I think, to make it successful.
Okay, appreciate the comments, and I think Legislative Council agrees with Senator Dolezal that line 50 should be the word may. And then the other thing is, you know, in this discussion, line 51 talks about material supplies and instructional support, and that may be an area of discussion as well as the rollback Senator Gooch is talking about. Senator Dolezal, I think you were next.
Just quickly, Mr. Chairman, this is in response to Senator Estevez's question. I don't think the answer that was given was actually correct. I believe that the question was, don't they have to list out what, excuse me, don't they have to list out what they'll buy for the classroom? And the answer is no. If you look on line 37, what they have to list is the percentage of the SPLOST that will go towards the proceeds. There is no list. So lines 36 says specific capital outlay projects or specific debt to be retired, or both, if applicable, and the specific percentage. So what the voters will get is not a list of what will be bought for the classroom. What the voters will get is a percentage of the SPLOST that will be spent in the classroom. I think that gets to the core of what Senator Estevez is asking, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he was saying, excuse me, sir, I think he was saying that just like it breaks it down, it would be X amount to go for this, not so much for computers, so much for that. I don't think that's what he meant.
All right, Senator Albers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what Leader Gooch was saying. My concern is we have a host now. You can implement a host in your local county, and you can use that to offset property taxes. If my memory serves, it's like $7.4 billion is the amount of reserves we currently have in our school systems in the state of Georgia right now. That's $7.4 billion. That's more than our total cap of rainy day reserves we're allowed to hold on as the entire state of Georgia. You know, if somebody's got a millage cap issue for operations, then we ought to address that in a separate bill, but that's what that mechanism was designed to do. And with $7+ billion in reserves, I am scratching my head a little bit on that again. I appreciate your work. Your work on literacy is phenomenal, and I think we should do something. But again, once we do this, in 14 years, it never stops at one. Never. That's my concern.
Well, I'm gonna ask Senator Gooch if he'll work with me on this.
The problem is, of course.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. I'm talking about.
We're engrossed.
I'm
We're
talking
engrossed
about,
when it come out of this committee.
No, I know that, but what I'm talking about for next session.
Next time.
Okay.
Okay.
All
You
right.
okay with that?
So is your wish to continue this discussion in next session?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I think that's reasonable. I think you're trying to help out literacy, but I do think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank y'all.
All right. Thank y'all.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your comments, too.
All right. We've got one more bill here, and as I kind of expected, we moved through those others pretty quickly. This one may be a little bit longer, but Senator Dolezal, do you want to do that from down here, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you Senate Bill 452. I'm working off of LC 550241S. This bill deals with tidal pond. I think it might be helpful to zoom out for a second and talk about the industry that we're talking about, and then talk about the regulatory scheme that we're essentially looking to put in place here today. And to help me with that, I would like to ask Bo Fears to come join me at the table here, Mr. Chairman, if that would be acceptable to you.
That's fine.
From Department of Banking. He was instrumental in helping put this language together. For those of you that are wondering, what does Bo fear? Bo fears nothing. We could go a lot of directions with that, and I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard that, Bo, but thank you for being here.
Thank you.
A title pawn is a short-term credit option that allows a consumer to pledge their vehicle, just as they would a piece of jewelry or other property. But rather than leave the vehicle in the custody of the pawnbroker, they leave the title of the vehicle. This arrangement allows the consumer the convenience of continued use of the vehicle. The consumer must own their vehicle free and clear of any liens and encumbrances. And these are typically smaller dollar loans for a period of 30 days, although they typically do have a renewal option if that is necessary. The purpose of Senate Bill 452 is to first transfer the licensing and regulatory authority of the title pawns from local municipalities to the State Department of Banking and Finance. Second, if there is a surplus after the recovery and sale of the pledged vehicle, this bill requires that pawnbrokers return these funds to the pledger. Finally, the bill extends and codifies federal military protections into Georgia law. The title pawn industry has existed in Georgia for over 30 years. State oversight and requiring a return of surplus after the recovery and sale have always had bipartisan support of consumer advocates, and even the support of the title pawn industry. Unfortunately, efforts at passing these reforms have been repeatedly derailed, and those who have felt that the legislation did not go far enough have been able to stop previous attempts at bringing return of surplus and regulatory mechanisms into law in the state of Georgia. So here we are, year after year, with no reform at all. State oversight and return of surplus are decades overdue. Both are common sense reforms that, frankly, should be opposed by no one, and I don't think you'll hear that they are opposed by anyone here today. Mr. Chairman, this bill, again, does three things. We establish state licensing and regulation of the title pawn industry. We establish return of surplus, which, just to put that into layman's terms, that if someone defaults on a loan, it allows the title pawn company to sell the vehicle, recoup their costs of doing so, but then they have to be compelled to return any surplus, any additional outstanding money they earn from the sale of that vehicle to the borrower, which is not currently required in the state of Georgia. And then lastly, we establish into the Georgia law, in this section of this code, Georgia military protections as defined in the Federal Military Lending Act, which prevents this type of product being used by active duty military. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll defer probably to Bo on some of the regulatory questions, and we can take it from there.
Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead and give us your name and title and who you represent. for the
Sure.
record.
I'm Bo Fears. I'm the Department of Banking and Finance's General Counsel.
All right. So, a few questions I've got first on it. It says, I know you talked about the military on line 16. It says to prohibit motor vehicle title pawn transaction involving certain members of the military or their dependents. But I didn't see that in the bill. Is it in there somewhere?
It's towards the tail end of the bill, Mr. Chairman. If you look in Section 8 of the bill, we establish covered borrowers, and then we point to a statute where that's established in the Military Lending Act. And we say that in line 797 that no pawnbroker shall conduct a title pawn with a covered borrower.
So that covered borrower would be the
is
military.
active duty military,
And
yes,
the
sir.
reason I do have concerns is I know one of these companies paid out $15 million last year for lending to military people in violation of the law. So that was certainly a concern to me on this. Let me see. I see on the bill too, now you're with the banking, but right now under banking, y'all got, what is it, about a 60% maximum on interest rates?
So it really varies. Typically in Georgia, if there's a loan, there's a general usury cap of 60%. And that applies to banks. Credit unions are capped at 18%, and the installment lenders, I believe, their interest rate is 10%.
All right, and this one, if I'm adding up the 5% per month and then it drops down, I think it's like 187.5%. Am I getting that right, or is my math wrong?
I do not. Well, that's what the current law is.
But that's what's in this bill.
Well, I don't think it changes current law. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. But it's not been under banking. Banking's always had that maximum.
Correct. And the title pawn, currently under current law, title pawn is excluded from the usury cap.
All right.
The 60% usury cap. That is correct.
All right.
Meaning that the 60% does not apply. The usury cap does not apply to title pawn. They can charge the rates that are currently permitted under Title 44. Yes.
So the chairman did the math on that. That is going to probably be what we're going to hear a large amount of discussion on today. I think that a couple of different things are worth highlighting, at least to kind of get it out there in the ether and open it for discussion. While there are, for the industrial lending companies, for example, they are subject to usury, which is the 60%. There are ancillary products that are also sold as part of those agreements. But I don't think that today needs to be a conversation about comparing this industry to Gila folks or comparing this industry to credit unions. The reality is that there's 50,000 people in the state of Georgia that take advantage of this industry today. And there's nothing forcing anyone from entering this industry and offering lower rates if they could do so in a profitable way. There are multiple players in this industry who compete with each other, and I think that probably the clue that these rates are what they need to be is that no one has been able to successfully come in and undercut them in the free market. Bank of America could go out and offer this product today if they chose to stand up a subsidiary, or if their investors chose to stand up a separate company. There's a reason that they're not doing it. I don't think that today needs to be a conversation around this industry versus X, Y, or Z industry. I think that that we should focus on is what this bill is doing. And that is taking an industry that is currently regulated by local governments and pulling them underneath the State Department of Banking. It is going to give us incredible visibility into the licensing, who owns these companies, gives protections around, excludes criminals from being able to participate in this industry, things that may or may not exist in local municipalities today, makes it uniform across the state of Georgia, and then does address other than this interest rate conversation, does address one probably of the largest consumer protection questions that has been raised, which is the return of surplus.
So, well, I want to talk about that, but the local governments, I think your bill specifically prohibits any local government from any regulations. Am I reading that right?
Well, the reason for that, Mr. Chairman, is that's the way it's done currently. And what the bill would do is establish the regulatory mechanism being at the state level under the Department of Banking.
And on the return of surplus, explain that to me. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to read this and see if I'm seeing that in there.
Where that is, I can point that to you.
Well, I think you're in lines 847 maybe, but I'm trying to read it.
It is. It's actually lines.
It's a required disclosure. I'm not
860.
I'm not sure that it's a requirement, but maybe I'm looking at that wrong.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to point you down to lines 860 through 866, and specifically lines 864 and 65. That that any surplus remaining from the proceeds thereafter, which the thereafter is the sale of the vehicle and the repayment of costs, shall be remitted to the pledger after the sale and shall not be retained by the title pawnbroker.
Okay. And then it looks like a couple more questions. Let the committee get in here, but it looks like it's pretty silent on any criminal violations. And I mean, I know the history of this, so I have some concerns on that.
That as it relates to licensees.
Sure. So there are in other areas that we regulate, and so I'm talking about non-depository areas, so mortgage, installment lending, and also the money service business provision. We typically will have criminal provisions typically, and it's primarily if anyone engages in unlicensed activity is where you will really see the criminal provision, and it can potentially be a felony. And then prohibited acts, and some of those provisions, some prohibited acts can be a misdemeanor. So that is what we have in our other non-depository areas.
All right. So that was one thing I saw, a civil penalty of $1,000, but I didn't see anything criminal. I'll stop, let somebody else, Senator Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I see that there are some fees that are removed and replaced with language around being commercially reasonable. Can you explain the intention there?
Yeah, it's It's multifold. I would point you to that. I recognize that, but I would also point you to lines 863 as it relates to return of service. We have actual direct costs. Sorry, 863. So commercially reasonable is currently defined in UCC. It's a statewide tariff essentially, and that is for towing. That's $25 to $75 currently in code. For storage, it's also $25 to $75 existing in code. So commercially reasonable is recognized elsewhere in Georgia code, which is why we have that in there. But as it relates to return of surplus, we actually have direct cost in 863. Most of these, I can't say every, because you gotta remember you've got some large players in this industry, then you have kind of one-off mom and pops. The large players that I've talked to all use third-party companies for the repossession or the storage. That's not a business they engage in directly. So that's, but there are some guardrails put on there in the UCC already around towing and storage in terms of fees.
So, but doesn't this leave it vague if you just leave commercially reasonable and don't cap it or indicate to follow UCC guidelines?
Well, again, if you want clarifying language in there, I'd be open to that. But the commercially reasonable language exists elsewhere in code and does recognize that's the intent of this here. But again, we're getting to the direct cost. So in other words, this would not fall under a standard schedule to where they would be able to charge a schedule fee for towing. It would actually need to be the actual cost of towing because of line 863. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So does the UCC, is that schedule define the storage fee and repossession fee?
My understanding is this $25 to $75 per day for the storage fee. I don't know what that would be for the repossession fee. I think that would typically fall under the direct cost because I think that in most scenarios, the repossession, the repo man is going to be a third party.
And I guess how does that relate to consumer transactions? I know that there's commercially reasonable can be understood as a couple different things. One being two parties, primarily B2B, and then there's a whole consumer retail industry where it doesn't necessarily cost the same. Consumers are treated differently. Is there any recognition for that?
I think with the ceiling, that would be the recognition. That's where the direct cost would be the recognition. So something in your district might cost something different than something in my district. I think those ranges give guardrails, and then the direct cost language on line 863 points that back to where that would actually need to be essentially the borrower repaying the direct cost of having to repossess or store the vehicle.
So do you think that language should be, it would be reasonable to have that language on direct costs versus the commercially reasonable language that's in there? And I'm specifically looking at the 707 and
I think that where you may have a problem with the, I think that if you were to strike commercially reasonable, for example, in 707, you may have a problem with entities that do this themselves and that essentially they have their own towing or storage company. I'm just thinking about a hypothetical here where they would essentially be charging a commercially reasonable direct cost, where they would need to point to something within the guardrails provided by the UCC, but then also codify a direct cost. I think that if your concern is that this is going to get into a runaway scenario where somebody decides that storage should cost $500 a day, we're going to store it for 5 days, we're then going to sell the car, we're going to keep all the money, I think that the direct cost should assuage your concern in there. But if you want to offer language that you think would perfect that, know that is the intent, and that is why we drafted this the way that we did.
okay. And last question, are there any other, and I think this might be for you, sir.
Okay.
Are there, other than title loans, are there any other types of loans or transactions that don't have a usury cap that you see under your supervision?
None under our supervision. And I'm not aware of any other in Georgia law. That's not true. The usury code, 60% would not apply to certain commercial transactions that were over, I can't remember what it might be over $1 million. So there is, but we don't regulate that. But of
Consumers.
over transactions we regulate. I think that is correct. But we do not regulate title upon at this point.
And do you know what other states are doing around that?
I do not. I'm unaware.
Right, Senator Orrock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author, this language on page 34 that's been under discussion for the last several minutes, the practices of this industry are widely known to be very damaging for people that secure these loans and then get enormous fines and fees and interest rate that almost locks in a guarantee that they are not going to be able to reclaim their vehicle. You're aware of that history, aren't you? And there's been scathing exposés of the excesses of this industry.
I wouldn't agree with your characterization. I know that this business currently has an internal complaint rate of 1/2 of 1%.
Excuse me, say that again?
The business currently has a complaint rate of over 1/2 of 1% in terms of the amount of people that they're doing business with that would file a complaint. So I think that you may have seen an expose that focused on a specific instance, but I don't know that I would agree that the way that you just characterize this industry, carte blanche, would be a fair assessment.
Well, I would refer to the discussion that went on federally with the leadership of our military leaders across the nation, deeming that the practices of this industry have been very damaging for the troops and their families, and that's why they have taken a position on the federal level to say this industry is not allowed to sell their product to our troops, to the members of the military in this country, nationwide. And that to me is a red flag that they're profoundly troubling practices of this industry. When our federal military deems that this is inappropriate, we're not going to let you target our troops and damage them with this exploitive approach.
Right.
That's why I call it pretty scathing. It's not a random article. It's a measure that's been taken by the military, and that's been violated by this industry. As recently as last year, they had to pay $15 million for breaking being scofflaws of the federal requirements that you can't go to the troops and sell this product.
All right, we'll move on to
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Beach here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dolezal, can you look at lines 692 through 699 and explain the first 90 days, it's 25%, I think, and then
After 90, reverts to half of that.
then it goes to 12.5% after
Correct.
90 days? Is
And
that correct?
That's an existing code, is what the chairman referenced when he did his math on the rates.
So let me ask you another question. Right now, if I want to get in the pawn business and I'm in Alpharetta, I got to go to the city of Alpharetta, that municipality, to get my license and get this. All this is going to do is take it to the state banking.
That's correct.
So it'll all be uniform. So you won't have Roswell doing one thing, Alpharetta doing another thing, and
You would not have, correct, it certainly as it relates to the licensing and the licensing oversight. I would point out to you, Chairman Beach, and this gets to what I talked about a little bit, maybe gets to what part of my rebuttal will be to Senator Orrock, perhaps, is that on line 694, it's no more than 25%. It's not a fixed rate.
I got you.
And for the 50,000 people using this service in the state of Georgia in any given year, I would submit that if there was a viable business model to do it at a lower rate, you would own the market. But what we've seen is that people have not been able to do that because these are people, and we've as these bills have been discussed in previous years, these are essentially people who cannot get loans anywhere else. So what we know is that if you bring them under usury, you'll put them out of business. If you put them out of business, those 50,000 people most likely will not get approved for credit anywhere else. I believe there's actually, I think I heard that a member of the General Assembly testified in the House last year that she availed herself of of the product offered by this industry when she was on her last leg, so to speak. It was able to, it provided a necessary lifeline for her. So I think that that's important to note, is that you're not mandating the rate, you're mandating the rate cap.
Gotcha.
So there is a rate cap. Now, we can have policy discussions all day long about what rate cap should be here in the state of Georgia. This bill does not do that. This industry has operated under this rate cap for 30 years. I know there's been some discussion as to whether that should be changed. What I am looking to do here with this piece of legislation, Chairman, is to provide that oversight.
Thank you.
All right, I need to, at this point, I think, see who is wanting to testify for or against this bill and try to divide up time. If you want to raise your hand, anybody that's wanting to testify on this bill. Just one, is that correct? Two over here? Okay. Yeah, if you want to step back, if that mic will work, well, no, come on down to the front here, yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Randy Robertson.
Object.
Yes, exactly. I'm swimming in a strange lane right now because I'm here to testify against a piece of legislation that not only is carried by a dear friend of mine beyond our relationship in the Senate, but also a piece of legislation that is almost exactly something we attempted to do several years ago. But it got through this committee, and I greatly appreciate that. We were not given the opportunity to have it come out of rules, but there was a difference in the bill that we got out, and it was because it had the usury cap. And while I appreciate what Senator Dolezal is attempting to do, I think doing this without the usury cap makes this I want to say a three-legged stool, but really no legs at all. Because I've researched this industry, looked at it. I think an attempt to codify Federal Lending Act language, while I know many times in this building we do that, in this case it's really not necessary. Because if you go to Fort Moore in Columbus, Georgia, and you run one of these businesses and you attempt to loan money to a member of the military, you're violating the Federal Lending Act. And this industry has paid tens of millions of dollars for doing that after they clearly understood what the federal law said. And there was a conversation yesterday, I think, with one of our chairmen on naming the military installations here in Georgia, and I think they're very important to us. But in my past life, I experienced a lot of families that the only place they had to go was some of these type of lenders. And back before this, it wasn't just Title Pond, but it was payday lending. And smartly, this body eliminated payday lending because it was as predatory as it could possibly be. I do not believe in the excuse where there's no other place to go. If there is, there have been times when this body has had to make changes and do things, but never accept failure as the solution. And I think for this bill to get down the road, it has to have usury. While I appreciate and have a tremendous amount of respect for Mr. Fears, and look, I've got a lot of friends sitting behind me, a lot of people I respect. But putting Title Pond under banking without usury is the proverbial proverb that we hear about somebody dropping something into the punch bowl. They do not go together. Title Pond in its current state does not belong with Truist. It does not belong with Synovus. It does not belong with legitimate banking institutions. There have been nonprofits around the state of Georgia that have established loan opportunities for families that are caught up in this. And listen, and I've said it to the point where it's embarrassing at times. You know, I did not grow up in an affluent family. I grew up with a mother who worked 2 jobs. And luckily, my mother never had to resort to this type of thing. But the people that I see do become trapped, and they become trapped quickly. To Chairman Dozal's concerns about the fees, I had to have my wife's car towed the other day. A switch went out on it in Harris County, where I live, and I had to have it towed into Columbus. It was $225. My wife and I had $225 to have the vehicle towed. Storage is based on how they store the vehicle. Towing is based on contracts in many cases if you want to see what's commercially fair in the communities. Most municipalities in Georgia and county governments do RFPs for towing service. And rarely are those numbers at $25 or $50. It's extremely expensive after the days pile up. And please understand, when this vehicle's been taken, many, many times this is the only vehicle that this family has. They don't get this vehicle repossessed and then they go home and hop in the whatever and continue on with their lives. They have to figure out how to get through their lives. If this bill were to put this industry under the 60 cap, if it were to do the other things, I applaud Chairman Dozal for talking about the reimbursements. That is absolutely something that we attempted to do several years ago, and felt that it was only fair that once the individual lost their vehicle and the vehicle was sold, that any surplus would be returned to them, less any reasonable fees. And again, reasonable, and I agree with Senator Estevez, we have to define what that is. Because while I appreciate the fact that there are a company here that says that they will do things that others will not do, I find it hard to believe with some of the business leaders that I serve in the Senate with that a 60% interest rate would put you out of business. I think if we do this, other industries may see this as an opportunity to come into the state and offer some of this. And I think to put it in banking and to put it under other associations when banking has a 10% interest, credit unions an 18%, and then to say 60 is equal, I think that's a tough pill to swallow. But if that is the only pill we have to swallow, then, I think that's a conversation to be had. But currently, in the way the bill is written, I'm afraid when it comes to protecting the poor here in the state of Georgia, this piece of legislation is a paper tiger. It does not carry the weight that we had hoped it would. I've been very transparent with my friend and my suite mate for the last almost 6 years that I've been up here, that with the way the legislation was written, we would end up on opposite sides of this particular subject. If you want to help those trapped in poverty in Georgia, then help them. And the last thing that I think the excuse that we should ever use is, well, it's the only option they have. If it's the only option they have, then maybe we need to do a better job of creating more options, because this is not an option for a single mom trying to get back on her feet and others. When you look at an interest rate of 187.5%, there's no justification in that. And it's just hard for us to walk out of here saying that we care about those trapped in generational poverty and other things when we say it's okay to give our thumbs up to a bill saying, yeah, we'll give you some money back, we'll give you some other things, but it's going to be 187.5%. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll complete my testimony. Thank you.
Let me turn my mic back on. Appreciate your comments. Give us your name and who you're with for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Andy Lord. I represent Georgia Watch, which is a nonprofit consumer advocacy agency here in Georgia. First, I would like to thank Chairman Dolezal for working with us on this bill. I have shared with him some of our concerns. We understand his intentions to be very positive here, and we are grateful that he is bringing attention to this important issue. After carefully reviewing the legislation, we have landed on a range of concerns, some of which have been touched on, so I don't want to repeat testimony, but I will say that from Georgia Watch's vantage point, there are three very important pieces to equalizing or leveling the playing field with regard to this lending in Georgia. Those are the aforementioned usury cap, so notably, Title Pawn is the only lending entity in Georgia that is not subject to usury. They have a special exception. The reason that they are not subject to that is because in code they are defined as a pawn, and pawns are not subject to usury. However, the product that they are offering is, by every other metric, a collateralized loan. You are borrowing money against the value of an asset. That's a collateralized loan, and as such, we think they should be treated as a loan, just like their competitors are that do those kind of loans. It's also notable, we have asked the industry, why do you have to charge such high interest rates? They stated that their average was 187. It can go up to 300%. They have said we are dealing with high-risk borrowers. That would be true if they did not have the car as collateral in advance. Furthermore, they have stipulated that they rarely lend more than 40% of the value of a car. So not only are they collateralized and protected, they are over-collateralized. They have more than double collateralized, and some could argue that this might be the only lending product where the lender actually does better when their customer defaults. Because when the customer defaults, they get the full value of the car that they've only lent 40% on, plus whatever money that they've already collected. And we have concerns with any product where the lender may be better off in the case of a default. But again, there's no other entity in Georgia that lends that is not under usury. We don't believe this deserves a special exception. This is a loan, not a pawn. A pawn is when you leave your product at the store and come back later to redeem it. In this case, that's not happening. A second provision that we've talked about, but I want to try to bring a little clarity to on the refund of surplus that has been touched on. Again, as it is stipulated, I have here on line 693 to 702, but I think there's been a sub, so these may have shifted down. As it reads currently in Senate Bill 452, it says that that it does allow commercially reasonable fees. What we have seen is situations where, so let me take a step back. Obviously, refund of surplus here is if you take a $10,000 car and that title pawn lends you $4,000 on that car and you pay back $3,000 of that $4,000 and default, they can repo your car, they can sell your car for $10,000, they can keep the full $10,000 in addition to what they've already collected. We are trying to close that loophole. There is a bill in the House right now that does do that. Our concern with the way this language is written with allowing commercially reasonable fees is that some bad actors in the space, and maybe none of them in this room, but there could be bad actors in Title Pawn that could, in fact, we believe. We don't see anything in the bill, and we're open to being corrected on this. We don't see anything in the bill that would stop anyone from charging a $500 tow fee, a $200 impound fee, a transaction fee, a contract fee, a termination fee. There's nothing that really gates that. So what an unscrupulous title pawn lender could do is simply look at the amount of surplus that you were due back as the customer. They could sit the car on the lot for a number of days and eat up that money. They could charge you various kinds of transaction fees. We believe that this is the Wild West, and that if we are really trying to refund surplus to customers, that there would be better language to do that on. The third provision is, of course, the bill going under the Department of Banking and Finance. This is also one of the only lending products not regulated by DBF currently. We appreciate the fact that this bill contemplates it going to DBF. However, if we have no usury cap, we have no real teeth in refund of surplus. There's another thing that we think is missing from this bill, which is a prohibition on a prepayment penalty. These are very high interest loans. If folks want to pay these off sooner, we think we should encourage that. We're not trying to trap them in a cycle of debt. We're trying to get them out of these loans to deal whatever their short-term crisis is. We would like to see a prepayment penalty. And Being at the department, what our concern is, as this bill is written, is that what we would be doing, we would be codifying in Georgia the worst practices of this industry. We would be codifying interest up to 300%. We would be codifying a refund of surplus loophole. And we believe we would be sticking our Department of Banks and Finance with a problem where folks are going to call and complain about the interest and the refund of surplus and how they're being treated by these title ponds, and they're just going to be able to say, yep, that was legal. So without the other provisions in here, them being under DBF doesn't necessarily do us a lot of good. And final point, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is there is another piece of legislation that's over in the House that contemplates this that we think is much, much stronger. And that model follows exactly what the military did. As has been indicated, the Department of Defense in 2016 banned title pond lending and all lending over 36% from all service members and their families. The military has banned this product. And not only have they banned it, but they've capped any other product at an interest rate of 36%. We are allowing 60% in Georgia on a collateralized loan. Collateral has already, there is no risk to the title pond as soon as they've collected that collateral because they've only paid 40% of the value of that collateral. So for them to have that over collateralization and be able to charge between 187 and 300%, we believe is counterproductive. And what this bill would do would be to codify and have the state sanction all of those things. And my last point, Mr. Chairman, is Georgia Watch does oppose this bill respectfully to Chairman Dolezal. We ask for your no vote on this legislation today, and we do believe that doing nothing, even though that's still problematic in Georgia, we believe would still be better than passing this because of that codification.
All right, we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anybody else that needed to speak? All right, come up and state your name and who you are with.
I'll keep this brief. Good afternoon, Chairman Huffstetler, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me a minute of your time. I did not plan on testifying today. I am reluctant to support all 35 more pages of regulation for our company. It's going to cost money, but we are regulated at a state level in other states. So we are neutral on these provisions. The reason I am standing up here is I just felt like some facts had to be clarified. First of all, we keep hearing 300% charge. First of all, this bill is not about what we're charging. That's current law. This bill does not create a charging structure for us. That's already here. All that this legislation does is provide some consumer protections that I am also reluctant to admit I've been advocating for 18 years, so that I'm reluctant to expose my age and the fact that I'm not getting my job done. But they're simple things that, frankly, would bring Georgia in line with some other states. And that's just state oversight, return the surplus. That's something that I've been hearing about since I took this job 18 years ago. That's what this bill does. And then it codifies what is already in federal law. And I do want to clarify the federal law. It does not target our particular product. It sets an interest rate cap for all credit offered to the military, and we never oppose it because, frankly, I don't think the military should be charged anything to borrow money, and I would hope they wouldn't even have to. So we never oppose that, but it's not targeting or banning our particular product. It is all credit or any credit that would exceed a 36% APR. And then lastly, I think there's a difference between charges and APR. So there's APR, which is a number we have to disclose by federal law in a box at the top of our contract required by the Truth in Lending Act. And then there's what we can actually charge. And so we have to disclose, because it's a 30-day term and it's a smaller dollar product, the APR is going to be much larger. Now, if we had to include fees that we aren't allowed to charge, let's say other people in the marketplace have fees and ancillary products, and if they had to include all of their charges as we do in their APR, they would be triple digit too. So I didn't want to get into the debate of rate because today I just wanted to support these consumer protections that honestly I've been supporting for 18 years. And I hope that you'll consider finally getting this done.
All right, we appreciate your testimony. Oh, my assistant said you didn't state for the record. If you could come back up, tell us who you are and who you represent.
I'm so sorry about that. Aja Domenico, and I'm with Select Management Resources. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs.
All right. And I do think one of the issues, a lot of times on these bills, two sides get together and try to work things out, and I'm not sure that happened here, and so I think that's some of the difficulty as well. I don't think there's anybody else that needs to speak on this, so if you want to come right back up, Senator Dolezal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for creating an opportunity for me to segue. I don't know who all is opposed to this necessarily. I will like the committee to know the members of the title pawn industry and members of GILA and myself met in Lieutenant Governor's office, I believe it was week before last. And while I know they don't agree with everything in this bill, we did make some changes to this bill on their request. We specifically excluded them from the definition of a title pawn lender. We moved their regulatory language from Section 3A to Section 310, which were two of the asks that they had in committee. I would like to point, I know Senator Estevez, you asked about this, and Senator Orrock, you may have well. If you Google GAMCD NCT tariff, you will pull up a document that Chairman Albers is probably familiar with, which is the Georgia Department of Public Safety statewide maximum rate tariff. Interstate rates and charges applying on non-consensual towing. So that is the statewide regulatory limits on towing and storage. And you can see all of those limitations there. They actually vary depending on the gross vehicle weight of the vehicle. And that is, so essentially what we are doing with this is we're attempting to bring it under current code, but also ensuring that it cannot be the maximum fees, but that it is only the direct costs. I want to thank my friends Andy and Randy for testifying. And look, reasonable people can disagree on a lot of things under this building. I think that the political reality is we have two options. We can do nothing, and we'll be in the state of limbo that we've been in for 30 years since Democrats first introduced this industry into the state of Georgia and codified into law. This is not, I don't bring that up to say that this should be a vote on party lines. I bring that up to say that for 30 years, members of the General Assembly and leadership in the state of Georgia have seen a need for this product to serve those that are not able to be served by traditional banking. They have codified rates into law that have allowed this industry to do business. They've codified rate caps on this industry. And if somebody wants to come and do it for a lower rate, they're more than welcome to do it. And that's the reality of people putting capital at risk to make loans. This bill endeavors to do really two things for the first time ever that I think we probably have the political will to do. And that is to begin to regulate this industry so we know who's in it. We know how many there are. We know who owns them. We require them to register and to get rid of the hodgepodge of laws that exist locally around this industry. And then secondly, we've talked a lot about return of surplus, and that is in this bill, as is the military lending piece, which, yes, is covered by federal law, but we just underscore it in this law. Mr. Chairman, I think the rest of this has probably been belabored. If you or the committee have any more questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I certainly don't want to take up any more of your time.
Senator Hickman was next here if you want to.
No, sir. Mr. Chairman, I just have a friendly amendment I think we've talked about, so when you get ready.
Okay, well, we've got to have a motion first to do that. So.
I think there's two friendly amendments, Mr. Chairman. One I've handed to the committee, and one bill from Department of Banking. And Billy, I think I'm sorry, Chairman Hickman, I believe you have one from Department of Revenue.
Okay, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the thorough work on this bill by the bill's author. I move we do pass by substitute Senate Bill 452 LC 550241S.
We've got a motion by Senator Albers. Is there a second to it? Second by Senator Cowsert. Now the floor is open for amendments.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually an amendment, actually from Department of Revenue, and I'll just read it. Can I read it off? Okay, I'll read it off. It said, and it goes on page 16, after line 386. This is number 8. 5, 6, 7. This is number 8. Send instructions electronically to the Department of Revenue to remove a security interest or lien from the certificate of title for a specific motor vehicle if such removal is expressly authorized in an order of judgment entered against the lessee after the exhaustion of any appeal rights or in a stipulation or agreement entered into by the licensee.
All right, so we've got an amendment offered as the Department of Revenue. You can just nod and say that's your request of that amendment. So we've got a second by Senator Albers to that amendment. And I think there was one more amendment you were looking at, wasn't there?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I believe there's an amendment that you have distributed to the committee.
Okay.
This
Make sure
just
we get
this
those distributed out first.
this is really just cleanup language that will ensure that the language, the definitions in Chapter 7 mirrors the definitions in Chapter 44.
Okay. All right. So while we're looking that over, let's have a vote on the First Amendment. All those in favor of the First Amendment, raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed? I think everybody's good with the Department of Revenue amendment. Okay, so now we've got distributed a second amendment that I think you were saying this was requested by the Department of Banking? Or?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Bo does not fear an amendment. This is amendment number 2. Again, just ensures that the language in Chapter 7 matches the definitions in Chapter 44.
So the crossed out is what's being taken out?
Yes, sir.
And the underlined is the new language.
I'd offer the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, everybody, just a minute more to read it. All right, we've got a motion by Senator Albers to support this amendment. Is there a second to that? Second by Senator Gooch. All those in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed? All right, I think we've got, did everybody vote? Let's do it one more time. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. All right, I think it's unanimous, okay. Okay, so we're back to the original the original bill as amended by these two amendments. Any further discussion we need to have by anybody? If not, we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of this bill, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got real concerns about this going forward. I'm going to, as chair, tie, and the motion fails. So, meeting will be adjourned.